You've been going on a fucking mad tear on these Facebook Lives. When did you start them? Like April?
That's a good
Yeah, right?
question. I think it's
You don't even remember anymore.
30. I think we're at 35. So I took a week off. So I think it's 9 weeks, 10 weeks ago. I've lost count. Yeah, early April.
Yeah.
Early April.
And you started off doing the Monday through Thursday, and then Friday you took off, and then it became like a dance party thing, right? You do the dance.
That's something different. Like that's some other shit we started doing. We're going to take a break from that for a week or two. It just doesn't feel like we just want to kind of, although I needed some self-care last weekend.
Yeah.
Because of all this
You
shit.
can fucking wear yourself out, and if you wear yourself out, you're not good. You're not good in your work. You're not good to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so. Yeah, we're doing stuff. I mean, what else can you do, right?
I told you before that after some few people, not to name any names, backed out, canceled last minute, like the 15 minutes before I'm setting up everything, all the cameras and shit. Oh, can we do it next week? And I told you, I'm like, man, the most impressive thing for me as somebody who's doing a podcast twice a week is that you have these fucking lined up every night, and big names, right? You had a co-founder of Black Lives Matter, right?
Yeah, we had Alicia Garza.
That was
because
crazy.
of Melina. So one of the things that helped is that Melina Bobadilla, who, if people know, who's like from Orange is the New Black and it kind of dabbles in this type of place. And we were just talking and she just wanted to kind of do something creatively. And I said, why don't you just become a special correspondent? I mean, I could have reached out to a lot of other people, obviously, people that I have a history with. Wink, wink.
No. That looks like a fucking big job, man. Jesus.
But at the same time, and I don't want to take this, I don't want to have people take this the wrong way.
Right.
Creativity, sometimes working with new people sometimes really helps. And I think of the time when I was really just all out with Latino Rebels. I was just like, I hated it. And one of the things is I saw you like really into it. And I was like, oh my God, he's really into it.
I was young, man. I had a lot of energy.
Yeah, he was young. So I was like, maybe I should just talk to him, to Hector, and see what he's thinking. And he's like, oh, I've been thinking of doing some editing. And I'm like, oh my God. So that kind of recharged me. So I feel like in this whole space, especially now where we can blink and there's another friggin' story, right? And you literally, there's a constant cycle of news it's just like a perpetual carousel.
And like right now, especially this week, I think really drained me.
Yeah.
I feel really drained today.
Yeah. And you have to like disconnect. You literally have to say like, I have to get off the carousel right now.
Yeah. I'll just read a book. I'll read history. I'll just completely disconnect for like 4 hours,
Yeah. And the thing is, for me, it's like, it's a privilege. Yeah. I say that it's a privilege.
Yeah,
I get
definitely.
it, but as a journalist, it's like, I have to take care of myself. And it's been fascinating the last couple of months how even when I started these live things, I was like, I'm going to do this because it's 10 o'clock at night. I don't want to start drinking tequila on a Tuesday. Like, you know me, right?
Yeah.
You hung out with me.
You feel yourself starting to slip.
Yeah. I was like, I stopped drinking beer. I haven't had a beer since like December 31st. And I really like
yesterday.
The what?
I got wasted yesterday.
There you go. You see, you got wasted. So I actually, but my point being is like, so then this was happening and you're staying at home and you're like, oh man, it'd be nice to have a tequila at 10 o'clock. And then you're like, I don't want to do it because I was actually in all this shit at the beginning. I was actually starting to sleep better because we didn't have the kids didn't have to go to high school. Like we didn't have to get up at 6:30. And again, I say this from, a typical suburban family of 4.
Yeah.
And so I decided to be like, well, if I want to do something, I've always wanted to do sort of like a late night type of idea off of the radio show, which is still growing, right? And I just was like, oh, should I call it Latino Rebels Late Night. And I was like, no, call it Latino Rebels Radio. It's just an extension of what you do. And then I just started doing it. I mean, the first couple of ones were, wow, this is hard. And then I got the hang of it. And then by like show 20, I was like, oh, I can do this. And now it's fun. Now I'm just trying to balance it. But the point being is that I responded to quarantine through creativity, and I didn't think I had it, but then I kind of have it. And now I'm kind of busier in a good way. And I'm super excited.
Yeah, it's good to have something. I find that it's good to have something to create with, you're reading all this news, and it's good to have like a show that you're thinking about every day, because it pulls you away from that. Because you're seeing, and now especially with social media, you're seeing like major news headlines in your feed every other post. Like, this cop did this, and I don't know if you just saw. You probably did. I mean, you're so attached to the news that the guy from in Maryland who was taking down the signs, attacking those kids, ended up being a former cop. So it's like, it's like the
and
first
be
headline,
surprised, right?
Yeah,
like,
and
that's
but the first head, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to desensitize you to bad news,
right? And also that whole incident about that, like in Bethesda. So if people know Bethesda, I mean, it's kind of bougie, DC, right? It's right outside of DC. It's off the red line, and it's where a lot of people with, it's like a leafy part of the DMV. But a fucking kid, dude, like a kid,
yeah,
like putting up flyers, and a white kid.
Yeah,
like
that's
white
the interesting
child,
thing. That's why I love that video, because it's all white people in the whole video, and so now you see that racism is like, it's affecting everybody. It's not between the races; it's within everybody.
Right. So my point being is like, so a white girl who was impacted by what has happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was with her parent. I mean, but
it looked like there's a mom, and I think the dad was videotaping.
Anti-racism flyers to kind of figure out like how to process this.
Yeah.
And you're still processing it, because I don't care what it is. It's like you're young. And then some D-bag in like a Lance Armstrong, like wannabe bike outfit.
We got a lot of those out here in Vegas. A lot of them.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, I'm a cyclist. I'm a cyclist.
And they got this big ass gut. I'm like, you ain't a cyclist,
like, dude,
motherfucker.
What the fuck are you wearing? Like, it's not a good look.
If you're a cyclist, I'm a cyclist.
Exactly. It's not a good look. If you're going to cycle, like, just put on shorts and a top. Look better.
You
but
ain't
anyway.
going nowhere, yeah.
But that's the point, is like, you see that, and it was almost like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. I don't. And so then I say to myself, all right, if you're going to do that, what if it was a black family doing that in Bethesda? Well, God forbid, there's black people in Bethesda, but what if that was no camera? If there was no camera, right? What if that was, you know what I mean? It's like, that's the part where I'm kind of like, without like, this shit goes on. I mean, if he's doing that with like white people,
yeah,
right? You know what I'm saying?
Well, no, but a lot of people see these clips and they're like, oh, that's just one incident. Yeah, but what are the odds that they caught the worst thing that's happened today in America on film?
It's like coronavirus. It's like, America, the United States has like a whatever it is. That's, you look at all the studies of coronavirus, we're probably like 30% of us in this country, like the estimates are higher. These are just reported cases. It's like cell phone cases. But let me ask you this. I mean, it is Friday, June 5th. I'm totally dating this. So, and I don't know when you drop it, but did you see what happened in DC with the mural and then the Black Lives Matter Avenue that was
Plaza, right?
The Plaza in Lafayette, right by the White House. And I'm just asking you, because I'm curious what you think about, because it seemed like it was, oh, this is such a powerful statement. And then the actual organizers of, movement for Black Lives in DC were kind of like, this is just neoliberal pejorative performance art to make white liberals feel good in DC.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Because you have a mayor who's like pushing for a jail, and here we go. You know what I mean? So I'm just curious, like, because that was also because this is the part where it's like you see it, right? You see it, and I actually tweeted it out, and you see it in the moment, and you're like, wow, shit, that's so cool. It's like by the White House.
Yeah.
Oh, take that, Trump.
Yeah.
Blah. Right? And then all of a sudden, then you actually hear organizers say, yo, wait a minute. And then you have to check yourself, because that's the part where I'm kind of like, I even have to check myself and be like, wait a minute. What are organizers? What is the movement saying? Like, I'm constantly like checking of to make, I just think we're still on this point in our history where you can't even process it yet. You're just living it. Right. And so
I've heard 2020 described as the Spanish influenza of 1917, the Great Depression, and the 60s in 1 year.
Or even like a couple weeks. Did you? And then let me give you another one. Yeah. Did you see the one in Chicago? Like that was on local Fox News, and like the Chicago police.
Yeah.
The guy in the helmet, and he just runs down the street. I guess it was in the Loop, and just starts batoning the shit out of someone. Or
the old man in DC, dude.
Or
the old man in DC is the worst. Because he's an old man. He fell back. He hit his head, and then he starts bleeding from his ears.
That's in Buffalo.
Buffalo. Oh,
yeah. But the one, which we can talk about that too. But the one in Chicago, like that looked like footage from 1968.
Right,
is what I'm saying.
Right,
with the helmet, you're like, oh my god, they haven't even fucking changed how they look.
Right.
That's the part where I'm kind of like, Chicago police still looks like Chicago police from 1968.
Yeah.
Like you would think after 52 years.
Yeah.
And what it's been, right? What that represented. You would think Chicago police be like, you know what? Maybe we should change the aqua blue helmets.
No, but I just said this on social media yesterday. I mean, fascists are all about the uniform, man. They want uniformity, and they're all about the uniform. The Nazis, after 50 years, if they had gone 50 years, they're not going to change that Hugo Boss uniform. It looks good. They think they look good in it. They feel good in it. They're not going to change their uniform.
Yeah. That's a good
point. And the uniform is part of the intimidation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the point, which I was like, here I am watching that video, right? Saying to myself, holy shit, nothing's changed, right?
Yeah.
It's 1968. I mean, I'm not saying this is 1968, but you know what I mean? It was like, and that really got me to think of do they really care? I mean, even the Buffalo one that you just mentioned, I mean, the fuck?
Yeah. I mean, we got to say this because I have family and stuff like that that are police officers. My dad was a cop.
I got cop stories, bro. I grew up in a cop family. I can break it down, but you go first.
No, I just want to say that, what I guess I'm arguing is that, this is a racist system. And so cops as police are defending and protecting and serving that racist system. Now, are there good cops who join the force, not knowing that that's what it is? That's not knowing the history of America, not knowing the history of race relations, of course, right? But those good cops have to stand up, right? And they have to... we need some Serpicos, man. We need some people. I had a teacher on Wednesday who quit her job because she was at a charter school, and they're like, this is bullshit. I came here to teach, and you want me to just pump out kids like it's a education factory, Yeah. And we need people like that. That's all we're calling for. Hey, if you're a good cop, get your boys, man. Check your boys. That's it.
Well, I don't think a lot of people know of my mom's side of the family in New York, but I'll break it down. But I think I've told you this. I'm not sure if I have.
You have a politician in your family, right?
Yeah, my grandfather was a congressman, but he was also the most decorated police officer in the history of New York City. So I grew up on the Bronx side in a cop culture, which people, when they hear that, from, whoa, what do you mean? I grew up, law enforcement. My stepdad was a New York Police Department homicide detective. I hung out, they all came over, like you would do, like cops visited cops, right? When you do like the Sunday barbecues.
My dad was on the softball team, the
you know what I'm saying? Like,
team.
It's a culture, right? It's like, and I think, you don't realize, especially in New York, at the time when you're like 9 or 10 or whatever, like what they were actually doing, because you just don't know. But you just
well, what you think? You think they're the good guys? That's your family. They're the good guys, obviously.
Yeah, and I think there's a part of me that's like, you struggle with it, but I think also there is, it's kind of gotten like, it's always been there, right? And you know, even if you look at how the Irish, right, sort of took over New York City police departments or Boston police because it was a good paying job for immigrants. That type of stepping up into the racist system, right? It's almost like an acceptance.
Yeah.
You're accepting to white supremacy, right? And it's really hard to really break it down, because you get into this point of like, well, you know, they protect us, you know, I understand that, but I do think after a certain, like, there's serving and protecting, and then there's just flat out beating the crap out of people,
right?
And then killing black men,
right?
You know what I'm saying? It's like, like you can't. They're not, to me. Like seeing what we've seen the last couple, like, I just wonder if it wasn't so militarized, because you're creating a confrontation as well. Right. If you're protesting, and then if you're looking like you look with, you know, and you're trying to intimidate, and people are like, I'm not having it, then you're sowing the seeds for
and load it up, man. You know, if I came into a bar and I have grenades down my chest and I have a bulletproof vest and I got a stick and I got guns and I got a helmet, and I step into a bar, people are like, this guy came to fight, you know?
Yeah. So you're already like on edge. And so I just struggle with the whole part of, you're beating the crap out of like people that are just protesting. Like,
and it's it's tied to what I said, what you just said, that they take people from working class communities, right? And they say, hey, this is a good job, you know?
Yeah.
And, but you know, that's why there are black and Latino cops doing this, beating their own people. I mean, they did it in Germany, right? They would take, in the ghetto, they would pick a few Jews to police the other Jews, right? Because then those Jews are not as oppressed, right? They get extra privileges, extra bread or whatever, right? And even though they know it's wrong, power corrupts, man. And like, once somebody has that power, it's, you know, there's some people who are saints who can give it up, but most people can't.
Yeah, and I think that this has just been an ongoing conversation since forever.
Forever, man.
About power and what are you protecting? What are you trying to save?
Who is America for?
Yeah, who's this country for? And what is it that what are we trying to save right now? Right. So that's part of this. And then when you've ignored a history that literally created a country on the backs of enslaved people and indigenous people,
on stolen land
with
stolen people,
you know, and then, you know, Mexican territories and
stolen
wars, land. And you really think that, like, you continue to do that, right?
Yeah.
If you're feeling something and you're just beating it,
I feel the same way.
It's like a water balloon. I mean, it could be the strongest water balloon ever, right?
Right.
But eventually the water balloon's gonna fucking pop.
Well, they're just gambling, though. They're just gambling that it's
so
it's like musical chairs or hot potato.
Right. So it's like this feeling of, what is it that, you know, this country, but I mean by this country, I mean this country's power structure has never really addressed how this country was really built. And so we get this alternative, you know, I'll put it in the context of a couple of colonialism, right? or just like property, like when you say property damage.
And like, we should say, as Puerto Ricans,
yeah,
none of this surprises us that the U.S. government could be like
so
this.
These are the two things I said. This is for W. So I was on KQED in San Francisco, but I'll give you two things about this. First of all, is one about the story of this country. So our quote unquote rebels, right? Our quote unquote freedom fighters, people that founded this country. I mean, like, I'm in Boston, right? And
Sons of Liberty.
Right. Those guys were a bunch of fucking, like,
man, can you imagine if there were people going around tarring, feathering, and pouring scalding hot tea down somebody's throat?
They were
burning
like,
the governor's mansion.
Yeah, let's take these British motherfuckers and destroy their stores, and let's take these Tories and, like, fucking tar and feather them.
People don't realize that the Boston Tea Party was like millions of dollars in today's money that they destroyed.
Let's just friggin' loot. Like, the Boston Tea Party is like, let's go in. Like, that was the target of the time, right? And you have museums built at it. You have, like, oh, it's a Boston Tea Party reenactment. And you have all that. So you start creating this narrative of, you know, fighting for freedom, fighting against colonialism, you know, fighting against oppression, fighting against tyranny, the Declaration of Independence. It's like you read it and you're like, God damn, what a document, right?
America's a fucking badass.
Yeah, exactly. Damn. Right. So you have that history, which then you go down that history, and it's a history of violence. It's a history of, like, destruction. It's a history of, like, power grabbing. It's a history of, like, maintain. And so that has been achieved, right? And we all are supposed to learn about that history. Then at the same time, there's a history of the losers, right? Because, you know, the people that are oppressed, completely gone. We've never, as a country, have really resolved that. Imagine, right? Imagine if the Indian, like, if we had social media and cell phones in, like, the early 19th century, when we literally decided to forcibly remove Native peoples and move them to, like, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Like the Trail of Tears. Can you imagine a live stream of the Trail of Tears right now?
We've kind of seen it with these migrant caravans.
Right? You know, so that's point number one. Point number two is when people, I was just asked this question on KQED, and it's like, well, how does it feel, you know, because you're not seen as, like, American enough? And I was like, dude, I'm Puerto Rican. I mean, welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Like, we're a colony.
Yeah.
Like, this has all been, you know, you grow up and you get this mentality. And even if you see it, I mean, I see it. And, you know, when I say this as someone who has been and, like, worked in white spaces and lives in white spaces, you're just not good enough. You're just not.
Very basically, right? Very basically. Like, you're just not good enough.
Yeah.
You might be very smart. You might be very eloquent.
Exactly.
But you're just not good enough.
Right. And it's like, I went to fucking Harvard and I still, like, get that you're just not good. Like,
so did Pedro Albizu Campos, and he still wasn't good enough.
Right. And then to put this in the context of, because I'm sure you saw the Tom Cotton shit show with, like, New York Times.
No, I did not.
Oh, you didn't see the this week? Oh, when he wrote, they wrote a, like, send in the troops opinion piece by the Republican Senator Cotton on Wednesday, and then all the black journalists of New York Times, like, revolted, and they're like, what the fuck?
Oh, they went ahead with it?
They published it. The headline is send in the troops. It was the two sides. It was the other side of the argument. Oh, wait. If you haven't heard it. So basically, friggin' Times journalists of color are like, ain't having it. There's, like, a revolt happening in the New York Times right now. Thursday. I mean, seriously, Hector, look this up. Thursday, the opinions editor, they pull the piece because it didn't meet their editorial standards, and it was a rushed editorial process. Okay?
Yeah. And
so then you have, like, Barry Weiss, who's, you know, talking about, like, oh, cancel culture and all that bullshit. When you had these black journalists and journalists of color saying, I mean, you're literally putting black journalists in danger.
Yeah.
Like, our own journalists, you're putting in danger when you say
send in the troops. And they're in the New York Times offices. Like, what do you mean, here?
Yeah, but send in the troops, right? So my point being is that I have written for the New York Times, right? And I actually just went on Facebook because I saw New York Times journalists who are working there right now who are actually fighting this. And David Gonzalez, who's an amazing photographer for the New York Times, Puerto Rican, New Yorican, writes this really well thought out. Like, I've been working at the Times for 30 years, and here we are. We're still fighting this,
wow.
Right? So it's eloquently done. So I'm at a point where it's like, you know what? I'm not an employee of the New York Times. I wrote a piece for the New York Times. It's a work for hire piece. I really don't give a shit. So I proceed to go on Facebook and share my experience as an opinion writer who got published by the New York Times. And it's this whole feeling of, you know, I got one published, Julio Castro, which was incredibly well received. And you sit there and you're like, wow, people actually read the New York Times opinion. So you think you make it, right? You think you're like, oh, I got it. I got the New York Times.
If you're writing opinion pieces, I mean, that's usually the gold. Yeah, that's what you're aiming towards, the New York Times.
Right. So, you know, you're always striving for this. And then I find, and I got very public about it. I put it on my Facebook, so I'm going to leave it there. It's public. I find, so then I submit 2 other ones because they like the first one. And okay, let me just put it this way. Hector, when I edit you, right? How long do I take? Seriously, to tell you this piece is good, this piece is not good, you should do this. Like, how many times do I really do that? Like, seriously, like, be honest with me.
What do you mean? What do you mean? How many times do you
like
edit
when you
me,
submit
basically?
a draft? When you submit a draft to me, like, and you say, "Hey, I wrote this piece. Can you publish this in Latino Rebels?"
You'll say it's great or no, we can't use it.
Yeah, or how long is the editing decision or process? Like,
I send it to you the night before, and then I get it in the morning.
Okay, right. And the perfect example, it's like you might send something the night before. I look at it, maybe by midday Eastern time, which would be the morning your time.
Right.
You get a text, links up, boom.
Right.
Okay. And I do that with a lot of people, right? I do it with Arturo Dominguez. I basically tell you, this is good, thank you, or
that's what you have no time. You got to do that as an editor.
Yeah, exactly. And I rarely go back and be like, hey, if you really want to get published, work at this. But I do that for people that contribute to us. So I'm coming with the assumption that what you're bringing me is valid, right? Is important. You took time to write it. I'm going to tell you this is publishable, and I publish. So for me, the editorial process, I understand back and forth. And I've been published by the Washington Post, NBC News, and my editors, every editor who has said, we've taken your pitch, send me a draft. I've never had an editor at the NBC News or on Washington Post or anywhere else. Mike, I wrote for The Guardian, anywhere else, like seriously, who has said, oh, this doesn't work. We're not going to accept it, right? With every piece I've ever written for any publication has, once they say, yes, we're interested, we'll work with you, right? And so maybe the longest I've ever waited for one is because of the news cycle. I wrote one about Puerto Rico during the earthquakes, and then my editor he loved it, and he's like, oh, the news cycle. And then J-Lo showed up at Super Bowl, and we're like, hey, J-Lo's in the Super Bowl. Now Puerto Rico's, it's like, let's go. So then we did, you know what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is that there's a process and there's a trust, right? That the editor that is out there is like, I value your work. At the Times, this is what happens. And I actually want to talk about it because I think it's an example of what white supremacy is. So at the Times, it's very editor driven. So an editor will reach out to you and say, hey, we really like you. Like, I got contacted by them, right? I got contacted by an editor, and they're like, we love your writing. They blow a lot of smoke up. You know, you're like, oh, wow, cool, right? Yeah. Oh, my God, it's the New York Times. Wow. So the first one, you're like, yay, Julio Castro, yay. You wrote a great piece. And they're like, well, we want more. So I'm like, great. So I read another piece. I wrote a piece around the time I was with you in Nevada about why Joe Biden, why Latinos have no political power. Right. That's what I wrote. I wrote like 900 words. Oh, this is great. Oh, let's fit. So I start spending a lot more time on it. And I'm like, what the fuck? Never runs. Right. So I was like, okay, it's a news cycle. Coronavirus is happening. I get it. I pitch another one about Puerto Rico during the time of Corona. And I really break it down. It's like, boom, boom. Oh, we'd love to see it. Yeah, that's great. Give us 900. So I write 900 words. I'm like, from the heart. Like, from the heart. Yeah. You know, I actually published it eventually. And I'll tell you that it was like, wow.
We're writers, but it's painful to write about painful stuff.
Right. So I'm like, oh my God, the Times is really going to do this. Like, oh, my editor is like really supportive. Then I get this, like I missed like there was a like I said, I need a little bit more time. Like give me 3 hours because something broke. And they're like, that's fine. But then it's like, I'm not going to get to it. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not going to get to it? And then I find out that they're not even going to run it. They don't even consider it. So I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm done. No, I don't.
And what do you think was really behind that?
Well, I think it's the process, right? I think what it is, from what I understand, is that it's a very white male dominated opinion section. Editors are bringing full pieces, which is bullshit. So they're taking the work of people that submit who have given their hard labor, and then they have to like go through this like acceptance Hunger Games phase, right? And then it's like at the whim of like, I don't know. There's an editor at an opinions editor at the New York Times does not have the power to be like, oh, we're going to publish you tomorrow. Here it is. Like there's a process. It's very structured, at least from what I understand. And having talked to other people, I've actually talked to several Latino journalists and authoritative voices who have shared similar frustrations. I say this very complicatedly because I think it gets to the point of how there is this notion that we're not, it's another example of imposter syndrome not being good enough, right? That you're kicking ass writing wise, but then the moment like some dude, whatever, like looks at your writing and it's like, it's not worthy of it's not in the New York Times voice. I'm like, what the frig does that mean?
Right.
Right. And so when you don't, the fact that the New York Times in 2020 still does not have
supposed to be intelligent, progressive people,
a prominent Latino or Latina opinions editor, or opinions like columnist, like right. I'm talking like David Brooks, Jamil Bowie, who's really good. I'm talking, Charles Blow. And the fact that there is no Latino or Latina, like that tells me that they don't fucking care. Right. Because
in New York, where there's Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and it's such a part of the culture, such a part of New York.
Yeah, and my thing is, it's like, I had to really struggle with it because I was like, for 2 weeks after, it's like, oh my God, I can't write. The New York Times, like, I was like, oh, I got rejected by the New York Times. They do that
to you. They gaslight you about your own fucking abilities.
Right, and then I said, frig that. I don't need them. I created my own thing. Like, I got jazzed up. You sent a piece, and then Arturo sent a piece, and then someone else sent a piece, and then I got a new student that wrote. I was like, you know what? This is what I do. I create the lane. I create the voice. The New York Times, I don't need them, right?
They're not our lane, man.
They're not our lane, right? So the point being is like, but what's happening in the backlash for that is because of this historic movement, and because when you see a tweet by one of the writers who said, you know what, the reasons why the Times decided to hire Black journalists in the 60s. Because they needed people to cover the uprisings.
Oh, to go there.
They needed people to go there, but they couldn't send white reporters. Right. So there's a tweet out there.
They needed black bodies.
Yeah, who was like, and I might call it up because it's so good, and I'd share it, and it really hit hard in a lot of ways. And I'm actually calling it up. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, I had a similar, maybe back in 2014, I wrote this long thing for Hispanic Heritage Month, and I was actually working with an editor from Indies Times, and we went back and forth. We worked on it, blah blah blah. Finally said it, and then she's like, "My editor in chief says, oh, she can't use this. It's not blah blah blah. It's not timely or anything." I'm like, dude, and it just put me off, man. It just put me off.
I know. So let me share. This is Brent Staples at the Times, and I'm gonna quote his tweet that he sent out on June 4th. Let me just give you a couple of tweets. It's a thread. He goes, white newsrooms only hired Black reporters at all because of the civil unrest of the 1960s. African-American reporters at the time could actually tell you which riot got them hired, right? We came in under suspicion of, quote, split loyalties. Early in my career, I criticized coverage in the paper where I worked at the time. A manager called me in and said, without even a hint of irony, and he's quoting, "We worry that you are here pushing a Black agenda," right? And then this is what he closes it up. In other words, I was welcome to stay only if I subscribed to what critical race theorists would later describe as the white normative view of world events. So that's the thing. It's like, I know we were talking about policing.
Yeah.
When you say like, black and brown cops, it's like this aspiration of white. So to me, the New York Times, like in this context of it now, as much as they, and you have the 1619 project, and I think it's great, but it's like, it becomes a museum piece, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Why couldn't the coverage be the 1619? Like, why don't you just cover the world through the eyes of a 1619 project, right? Yeah. It's what I said on In the Thick with Maria after, we recorded, and I said, the Tom Cotton thing, it was a rushed editorial process.
Yeah.
When I'm
with that headline.
Yeah. When I'm busting my tail for 900 words back and forth, seeing edits, and it's not even my words anymore. And I'm not good enough, but you can publish that. You can publish
white privilege, right? A white person can shoot at the hip on page, but we have to go over our pieces over and over.
I felt like it's like, well, what do you really mean here? How do you prove this point? And I'm like, because I'm fucking Puerto Rican and I know Latino politics. What else the fuck do you want? Because I report on it.
Right.
Like, I have to give you a link for certain things? Hell no.
And yet a senator can say send in the troops on American citizens, and that's
exactly. So I'm saying, and I know that there's good people who are trying to change media, but I'm not playing it anymore. I'm not going to be here to be like, I'm going to work 30 hours of my time for free so that I can be a contributor to a place where in the end, I'm just seen as like a little checklist item.
Right.
That's what it is. So I basically told, my editor very clearly, and I don't really care anymore, because I think it's important for Latino journalists to begin to say, like, stop treating us like shit. And it's, even if you are, like, even if we have the shame, like, it's, this person is very well intended. I think it's the system. Right. You can't change the system.
Right.
Right. It's like that cop who comes in and he's like, I'm going to change it. I'm going to like connect with people
You're not changing the system, especially not
in my neighborhood.
This within the system stuff. Change it from within. You're not going to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to do community policing. And I know that there's so many like good, I have friends of mine who are cops.
For sure.
Like, well-intentioned, but at some point it's like, there is this feeling of like, even in New York City Police Department, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying is that pushing back is important, and saying your voice and saying, you know what, I'm going to be very clear. This is what I said. It's like, I'm going to be very clear. I'm getting published in a lot of places, and in a couple hours, I know if I'm getting published by NBC News or what. Like, I have editors who tell me yes or no. And if they tell me no, I'm like, good. Like, I've had pitches rejected from my editor. Right. It's like, and I'm like, good, that's fine. Move on. But don't ever call me again.
Right. And those old people at the Times, if they got to get their head out of their ass out of 1970s. The Times isn't what it used to be. Media is not what it used to be. People are building their own. People are building their own space.
And so I said, don't ever call me again. I appreciate the compliments of like what I've done in the past, but I don't have to prove myself.
Yeah.
Like, either you get it or you don't.
Right.
And the reality is, I'm not here to prove myself that I'm not,
because people get it. You have, on social media, your work on Latino Rebels, people get it.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm perfectly fine with doing what I'm doing and having people get it. And if this is all I do for the rest of my life, I'm a lucky son of a bitch, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm lucky as hell.
I feel exactly the same way. It's right when I gave up trying to get into that world, trying to get into that status, trying to get that approval. Right when I gave up, and not out of anger, just out of being tired.
Yeah.
Then there came the sense of freedom of like, you know what? I can just do my own shit, and people will like it.
And this is what I'm saying. Yeah. And this is what I'm saying, because then what I've told you what gives me pure joy is that I get to publish pieces by you and other people. Like my dad, I didn't even tell you this. My dad, who's a great guy.
He wrote a really long, and he understood my piece in a way I hadn't,
Yeah, and
I think when everything's said and done, and people look back at Latino Rebels in these last 10 years, and who knows what's going to happen in the next 10, they're going to be like, man, that was a special publication. That was a special site. interesting, important work was that it's going to be in history books, those articles.
Yeah. And so, but the point being is like, then my dad texted me. Not only did he put a Facebook comment, he's like, "Oh, I really love that Hector Luis," and I'm like, "Yeah, he's really damn good." And you know, that's the point. It's like, if you're not gonna like, if you're gonna it's like, if someone like me with a Harvard degree who created a site out of nothing, who's published 500 contributors, who's been writing for like, you know, I've been writing on the side for years and writing pieces, and if I can't make it because like I don't want to play the game, I'm just gonna go and create other voices, and we'll see you later, because you're gonna come back. Here's the thing: you're gonna come back to us.
Yeah,
you're gonna wake up in 5 years, and you're gonna be like, "Wow, we really missed this," and then you're in a different position.
And that's how you destroy it. That's how you topple the system. You build another system underneath it, and that's what you're doing. That's what we're doing. That's what you're doing in media.
And so I think like everything in the end is all about how do you dismantle the white supremacist system, because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And we haven't even begun to discuss like where it is in our own countries, right? And I'm done. I am done.
I'm just too mad, too tired, and I don't give a fuck.
I am done having argument. I am done like explaining to a Latin American why Latin America is a white supremacist region. Like why white supremacy.
Yeah, I saw that
reigns.
tweet.
I mean, when
we don't have any race problem in Brazil. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
Or in Cuba.
Or in Cuba. Or anywhere in Latin America.
Venezuela. I mean, here's the thing. I don't even think sometimes I think the Latin American like popular like left romanticism. There was an article by the government of Cuba. The actual like ministry, like this is not some opposition thing. This was the actual government of Cuba. 2019 says, you know what? This whole eradicating racism by Fidel Castro, that was a great goal. Never achieved. Like that is what the government of Cuba said. That's not like Miami propaganda. That's not coming from the State Department. I understand that, right? And so let's be real. I mean, yes, have advances happened in places like Venezuela and Cuba and other countries and even Brazil? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, compared to where it was.
Right.
But let's not pretend that, this is all fine and dandy. And that's where I'm kind of like, when you have the former Secretary of Health for Puerto Rico go on Twitter and say, hey, why should, we should also be talking about black on black crime and all this. I'm like, this is the former health secretary of Puerto Rico, the first the first doctor in Puerto Rico to perform, I believe, open heart surgery. Like he's a big deal. It's like a big,
Ted Cruz has a law degree from Harvard.
Yeah. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then he doubles down and says, yeah, no, white on black on white crime. And then he goes, Asiatics on Asiatics crime.
Asiatics?
I was like, Asiáticos. He was saying Asiáticos.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
I thought he said it in English. I'm like, Asiatics?
No, he said it in English. He said, I think it was one of those like.
That's one of those eugenic terms, Asiatics.
Yeah, right. But my point being is like, and then there was a Black Lives Matter protest, very small one in Old San Juan, I believe like on Wednesday, and it was a live stream. And Hector, I mean, what does George Floyd have to do with people in Puerto Rico? Or we don't have a problem. We're from all races, and you just have to like really take a breath, because
and that's 3 million people on a little island. And if there's people there who pretend to not know that they have racism on their island. Right.
And then the point being is it's a dual type of front, right? It's like, how do you amplify black voices in the context of the quest for an America, I think, that looks good on paper, right? Like America looks great on paper.
Yeah.
Like if you take all the paper that America has done, looks pretty good.
Yeah.
right? You know, it's like, oh, this team looks really good on paper. But then you look at the reality and you look at what's happened, and it's nowhere reflective. So you have to constantly remind yourself that this is not about oppression Olympics either, right? This is about visually seeing that movement that has really been since the first enslaved person said, "Oh, hell no."
Yeah.
And that happened in 1609. It's like, where the fuck am I? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You don't think there was someone who was like, what the fuck?
There's let's put it this way. There's slaves that never made it to the coast of Africa. Let's put it that, or never made it across the ocean because, not that they died, but they fought back and they were put down. Right.
So my point is that resistance, like we just think that everyone just got up and said, capture us, we're docile. But that system, right? If you really start thinking of it was the biggest human trafficking like operation in the world.
Yeah.
Right. If you think about when that was happening, like people have to really start thinking about this was like in fucking 17th century.
Yeah. It was recent.
It's like logistics.
1800s, the Amistad, I mean.
But my point being is like you literally created, like if people really start putting like, I'm not trying to compare, but it's like if people really start putting their brain into be like, okay, what was it they were doing, right? It was transporting, right? You're transporting something like people.
200, right? 400 black bodies laid down in a ship cargo hold.
Right. And so it becomes a system, right? And so this whole notion of like logistics and all this, like you're in charge, you're the supply master, so you create this system that literally displaces a continent and then forced labor. And you think that has nothing to do with now?
Yeah.
And
you came here and you wiped out all the Indians.
Right. But this is the part of what I mean. It's like if you have done this for centuries and then you think, oh, well, you had your civil rights movement.
It stopped in the 60s, just like that.
Yeah. How long was the civil rights movement?
Yeah.
Compared to you're fighting 500 years of like oppression and violence, and you think it's all solved in 5 years when like LBJ's like, yeah, equal vote. Yeah, this is great. All right, we're good.
Great society. Mission accomplished.
And that's, I think, the whole notion of white supremacy too, because they're like, it's power, right? They know.
It's power.
They know how much, here's a little crumb. Oh, let's divide and and then it's like, hey, really smart black and brown people, come to the higher institutions. Yeah. Like, here you go.
We'll give you status. We'll give you some of our power.
We'll give you a little status, a little success, right? This is nice. Yeah. It's nice, right? And
vanity's a bitch, man.
Right. And then, and by the way, let's make sure that, they're not talking to each other. Like, let's do that as well, because that whole black beret, like brown beret.
Oh, you're one of the good ones. You're one of the good ones.
Yeah, like
your
Black
people
Panthers,
are fucked up, man. They're wild.
Yeah. Black Panthers, Young Lords, brown beret thing that all of a sudden started happening, and people were like, oh wait, we do have a lot more in common. Oh no, let's fuck that up with like some FBI, like counter intel pro, right. And Puerto Ricans like, no, let's arrest you guys. And like, yeah, Mexican guys, let's kill a journalist. Let's have police present at the Chicano moratorium. Let's like break you all down. Oh, and then Black Panthers, like, let's just like assassinate your leaders. Right. So then it becomes the divide and conquer mentality was manufactured. Right.
Yeah.
So,
it's old.
And this even in this invention of like Hispanic, right? Government imposed label. All of a sudden, boom, we're a group, right?
Yeah, what are Hispanics? Like, we're just
right.
We do come from all races. It's not a race. It's just a group of people that come from a place.
Right, but I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? It's like.
But I'm saying, they created Hispanics just to have this other group to have. Black and white was a little too tense. So now you add another group in there.
And then let's divide and conquer. You know what's fascinating about all this, and I'll leave you with this, is which doesn't surprise me because you know Latino Rebels since 2011. We've been kind of, and I've done this before. I mean, if you look at my blog, I'm actually thinking of looking at my old blog and just bringing stuff I wrote like 10 years ago and putting it up on Rebels and dating it to that time, because I realized that a lot of what I did, like pre-Rebels, is like still relevant. I was looking at stuff. I was looking at like, you know, Mexican comedies where like, you know, the dude was from Africa and it was like the most racist shit I've ever seen, like literally.
Right.
But the point about all this is that it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, right? Yeah. So I expect, you know, every comment that I see now in what Rebels does about this issue, I could have told you people done it like 8 years ago. It's like someone's like, literally someone just posted, right, about the stuff I said on NBC News about, you know, white passing Latinos need to like realize that they've played a part in this, recognize their privilege, and we carry our racial baggage, and you have to like wake up and blah blah blah.
How is that controversial? That's the worrying
right.
part.
But then I literally get a comment from a friend who's like, "Well, when are you going to talk about like blacks that attack Latinos?" And then I'm saying to myself, "Do you not realize this is exactly what they want you to do?" Like,
obviously that person doesn't know the history.
Do you not realize that when you create inequality and you put marginalized people together and they're both going for the same crumb, like this is exactly what they want you to do?
Right.
Because they'd rather have us killing each other than
unifying. You see two pit bulls fighting in a pit, you don't blame the pit bulls. You blame the people who put them in that pit to fight up.
Yeah, you blame off. You blame, yeah, exactly. Like you blame like who create exactly. So, but you can't have that conversation. So that's the problem with this, is that you see this devaluing of Black lives, and that anyone who speaks out, and if you're not Black, if you're non-Black, Latinx, and you say like, yeah, Black lives need to be amplified, then you get like, oh, what about us? What, you forget about us? I'm like, no, because here's the thing. Like, I can go through everything. It's like, guess what? You know, Puerto Ricans getting oppressed, the nationalist movement getting like suppressed and tortured and assassinated and bombed on and jailed and vilified.
Yeah.
We got it. We feel it, right? So that's why we should be identifying without
our
any
women
thoughts.
Being you know, getting their tubes tied 2/3 in the 50s. You know, they were trying to get rid of Puerto Ricans. We as Puerto Ricans should be instantly identifying with Black Lives Matter. Same thing with, you know, if you look at the massacres of Mexicans, if you look at, you know, kids in cages.
Puerto
Rico's a cage.
Like, right. You know, things like, you know, even if you look at anti-Mexican violence, anti-Mexican hate, lynchings of Mexicans in this country.
Right. It's all connected.
Lynchings of Mexicans.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you have Mexican Americans who are like, Blue Lives Matter, all lives matter. Black people have taken over. They're like, that's what people say.
Yeah.
And you sit here and I'm like, oh, and then they listen to the president, and it's like, because there's this desire to be white, this desire to be like part of the white club,
desire to have power,
and this
to be close to power.
And so the problem, and that's when you add a little bit of like Latin American racism into it. So then you go down to Miami, and it's like, I mean, Miami is the most fucking segregated town in the world. Like, you do not see Black Miamians. I'd put Miami up against Chicago any day of the week. You know, that's why it's called Overtown. Like, you don't see like Cubans and Latin Americans living in Overtown. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, there's a reason. So the segregation in a place like Miami, you go down to downtown Miami, you don't even see a Black face. Like, you see a lot of like very, you know, very well-to-do, very good, you know, a lot of people who look like me who speak Spanish are in Miami, right? And so that's what I mean. It's like, this is all connected. We can go forever, but Florida's a Spanish name. Miami's a Indian tribe. I mean, it's right there in front of us. What we've done, what America's done, it's right there, all around us, and we refuse to look at it. But thank you for coming on, man. I know you gotta go somewhere. Man, that was a really good conversation. Dude, when do I
ask you? I wanted to ask you.
When do I not bring it for you? Like I told you. Like
I wanted to ask you what you think about these police going after journalists and Australia and stuff like that. That's
being a journalist right now. Like when you do have a president and you have people who justify violence against the First Amendment, and what's interesting. So I get the white. It comes with the territory, right? You just have to know that you're going to be targeted.
Yeah.
I think about a lot of my colleagues who are out in the field, who are doing it.
Yeah.
I think about Omar Jimenez of CNN and others, Oliver, and I say to myself, I'm very blessed that I don't have to cover uprisings, cover protests. Sure. But I worry. But I also think when you have enough of a propaganda machine that justifies the targeting of journalists, so anything, so what the White House does now is they'll send daily briefings of the news, and it's all opinion pieces about how great the president is doing. There's not even news being shared. It's like, what is the White House reading? And it's like they shared like 3 of your opinion pieces and like say like, you see, we're doing great. And it's like, that's not journalism. That's you just are sharing opinion pieces.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't help that someone like Candace Owens does what she does. I mean, that video was ridiculous. I mean, that just was despicable.
Yeah.
But it only takes a few to be part of that. It just only takes a few because the thing is, white people are so smart when it comes to that. White supremacy is so smart is that once you get people to agree with you and you're black or brown or Asian or whatever, all of a sudden, wow, look at your platform. Wow. 25 million views. Whoa. That's fascinating, right?
Yeah. Give that up to stand up for your people. You're not, so most people wouldn't do that. And as people studying, watching Latin America forever, we know what happens between police and journalists.
I know but anyway, I love you, brother.
Tell people where they can find you, bro.
Oh my God. Where can they find me right now? It's Julito77 on Twitter, Latino Rebels, Instagram, Facebook. Where else are we? Twitter. Yeah. Catch us Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays on Facebook.com, Latino Rebels, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, Latino Rebels Radio Live. We also have Latino Rebels Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. It's really interesting. People they still are listening to us, which is good.
I think now more than ever.
Yeah, we got listed under Apple Podcasts under Explore American Identity. And I think we're the only Latino podcasts in that list. So it's kind of cool.
Which is odd.
I know. Like we just showed up and it's like Explore American Identity, Latino Rebels. I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And and just find me wherever and very approachable. But don't come at me and say that, Latin Americans aren't racist because we come from all different races, because you're not going to get a happy response from me.
We'll leave it at that, man. Thanks for coming on, bro. I'll keep in touch.
All right. See you, bro.
Can't wait till you can come out here to Vegas again. We'll party.
Oh my God. It's going to be the party of the century.
Take it easy, man. Stay safe. Stay happy.
All right.
Your family too, man.
Take care, bro. Bye.